The Twitter files are about mind control, nothing short of manipulating and dominating your mind. It's the Cain Podcast on Fox News Podcast. What's up? And welcome to Monday. Welcome to a new week. Less than 2 weeks until Christmas. As always, I hope you will download, rate, and review this podcast wherever you get your audio entertainment. Apple, Spotify, or at Fox News Podcasts. Strong Opinions Weekly Held is probably one of the most charming positions to stand on in life. It reflects a certain passion, conviction, but flexibility, openness to the world. Strong Opinions Weekly Held. I get my hair cut still in New York City. My barber, his name is Sharky. I don't think it's his Christian name. I'm not sure it's the one that his parents gave him when he was born in China. But he's Sharky. Sharky tells me that the reason that my hairline might be receding in the corners of my temple is that my skull is growing as I get older in life. It's true, he tells me. It's absolutely true. Your head grows. You're not losing your hair. Your hairline goes back. Sharky, you're telling me that Stephen A. Smith's skull has grown, not that his hair has crept back from his forehead. But he believes it strongly, and he's trying to convince me. Sharky has all kinds of strong opinions. We were sitting there this weekend as I was getting my hair cut. I'm going to go with something different soon. I'm going to go a little longer. And a group of 6 cops walk by in New York City. And he says, see that? See, man, that's BS. I said, what? He goes, what are they doing? They're protecting each other? They should be fanned out. All sides of the street, all corners, protecting the street. What is this? It's not right, man. It's BS. He's got a theory on everything. Yeah, he bets on football, but he thinks it's fixed. He wants me to tell him about the news. He knows I'm in the news. He wants me to tell him. And he says to me, come on, give it to me. Come on, Will, please, just tell me. I know you know. Like, there's a story behind the story that I don't get to tell. And he's like, I can take it. That's his literal words to me. I can take it. I said, Sharky, if I know something, I'm going to share it with you now and on air. But he thinks there's like a secret compartment, a door inside the newsroom, and only those in the know get to go through the door. And he wants me to tell him what's on the other side of the door, that he can take it. He's got theories on absolutely everything. He'll tell you the football games are fixed. He'll tell you your skull grows. He'll tell you anything, but the minute that I get to call him out and go, Sharky, come on, he starts laughing. I don't think he abandons his position, but he's capable of taking what he says seriously, but not himself seriously. I think Sharky is awesome. I like the fact that he convinced me in all that conviction to switch the part in my hair. I mean, I've been going for a good, I've been with Sharky for probably at least close to 10 years. So I went over 30 years parting my hair on the right side of my head, right? And then I learned later that's for creative types. That's artistes. And I didn't care. I don't care that more world leaders part their hair on the right side or in reverse. I parted my hair on the right side, and that's the creative artiste types. And the most world leaders parted their hair on the left side, which he convinced me to do, not because he thought I should be a world leader or inspire trust, but that it would just look better. And Sharky was right. So I appreciate his conviction. I appreciate his passion, and I appreciate his willingness to laugh at himself. I love his theories, and I think it's a lesson for all of us. Take what you say seriously. Do not take yourself seriously, and hold strong opinions, but hold them weekly. My big story of today is the Twitter files. And I believe we need to put, before we dive deep, this story into the appropriate context. The Twitter file story isn't really about Twitter. It's not even about YouTube or Google or Facebook or big tech. In essence, it's not even really about censorship. What the Twitter files is the latest chapter in a story to propagandize and manipulate the human mind for power. It's not new. Only the modes and mechanisms are new. I would say roughly 1 year ago here together on the Will Cain Podcast, we talked about the father of modern-day propaganda. From the 1920s through roughly the 1960s, Edward Bernays taught first the advertising agency, the marketing world, and then politicians the way to sway and control the human mind. In short, the Twitter Files is just the latest chapter in a story of mind control. Twitter Files 2, 3, and 4 have been uploaded by various reporters onto Twitter since we last spoke. Late last week, Bari Weiss took us behind the scenes of shadow banning in Twitter Files 2. Then Matt Taibbi re-entered the fray with Twitter Files 3 to show us the close, what word shall we use, partnership with the government of the United States of America and Twitter. And in Twitter Files 4, journalist Michael Schellenberger, who's been a guest here on the Will Cain Podcast, laid out how Twitter pretended to have a policy while executing the decisions of many kings. Arbitrary Caesarean thumbs up or thumbs down in the middle of the gladiatorial ring as to who will live and who will die in the virtual space on Twitter. We await the return of Bari Weiss to show us exactly how it went down on January 8th of 2021 when the leader of the free world was silenced. Well, let us walk through Twitter Files 2, 3, and 4 and show how they're just the latest chapter in the attempt to control your mind. In Twitter Files 2, Bari Weiss laid out that Twitter embarked on a extensive program of silencing dissent. And dissent in this context inevitably meant, almost exclusively, but not exclusively, but it inevitably meant conservatives. People like my colleague at Fox News, Dan Bongino, had their accounts tagged "Do Not Amplify." He was disappeared from the search results on Twitter. If you happen to go to Twitter and thought I might want to follow Dan Bongino or see what he said recently, you wouldn't find him in your search results. Similarly, Charlie Kirk, who hosts a syndicated radio program, appears frequently on Fox News and is the leader of Talking Points USA, had his account deemed not safe for work and turned down. But it wasn't just conservatives. It was bigger. I said not exclusively. It was bigger than conservatives because what they were truly silencing was dissent. Dr. Jay Bhattacharya is a scientist, a doctor at Stanford University, and he was what we assume to this day, probably accurately, but what we assume to be a renegade voice, a dissenting voice on the consensus around COVID. Bhattacharya raised questions about the efficacy of lockdowns, the harms done to children. He even questioned at times the efficacy of masks and the risk-reward ratio on, for example, children getting the COVID vaccine. Bhattacharya had his account as well, shadow banned, silenced, turned down by Twitter. What is fascinating about this, to continue to try to understand that this story is about Twitter, let us understand the role that Twitter plays. So first of all, you should know, Twitter is up in every newsroom. I'm telling you, like if I walk through the Fox News newsroom and producers all have their desktop computers up or their phones in their hands, almost every single one of them have a tab open to Twitter. And that's not unique to Fox. That's at CNN, MSNBC, the New York Post, the Washington Post. It's even up in every conservative exclusive publication that you can imagine. If you went to Breitbart or Revolver, the people behind those publications inevitably have up before them Twitter. And it's not just the producers. If you go into the executive offices of, again, not just Fox and CNN, and not just the news industry. If you go into the executive office of anybody at ESPN, I will guarantee you, if it's not open currently, within the past hour, they've had a tab open to Twitter. Why is that important? Because Twitter serves as the germination point. It is, by the way, sort of the hallway of journalism. I don't want to say it's the cool kids' green room. No, it's more like the hallway in a high school. It's where everybody mixes between class, where fights break out, where people make fun of each other, they bully, they hook up. It is literally the hallway of a rundown high school. And journalism is basically conducted on Twitter. So it's the germination point that then metastasizes out into your newspaper pages, your minutes on television. It's really impossible to overstate the power such a small minority of our population and a small minority of voices have in defining the quote-unquote narrative. Look, what happened on Twitter could literally define what is consensus. It could define what's newsworthy. I can't tell you how many stories. How about this? I can't tell you how many people got paid. Fake stars were created off of Twitter. And I'm not taking shots at all these people, but I'll give you a couple of examples. This was an early Twitter example. And I'm going to go back, I believe, to like 2014. Ronan Farrow was a big time at that time Twitter personality who was real big in the beginning of the Me Too movement. And he had influence on Twitter, a following. And MSNBC thought that meant, well, he's ratings gold. So they gave him a midday show on MSNBC. And it's one of the worst rated cable television shows in history. Now, look, that's no shot at Ronan Farrow. That is just simply to point out that Twitter stardom is not cable news stardom. And Twitter represents a really small percentage of news consumers. But that doesn't and hasn't changed its influence. At ESPN, I could name for you, and you could guess, the stars that got shows got paid. I'm telling you, got paid based upon the perception of popularity because of Twitter. I know shows that programmed, by the way, they're failed shows, they're no longer on the air, that programmed by Twitter. I mean, literally, like, they would copy PTI, pardon the interruption, with the rundown on the side of the screen, but they would literally adopt the lingo of hashtagism and memes. It's almost like they tried to turn your Twitter scroll feed into a 30-minute television show. Massive failure. But the point is, Twitter had such, and still does, ridiculous power. Hell, it's bigger than ESPN. It's bigger than media. How about this? The definition of science has changed in the last couple of years. You know, science is a process. We know that. Science is the process of taking a theory and finding out if it survives tests, trial and error, questions. You know, anybody who's willing to be sacrilegious to the theory itself is actually advancing the concept of science. What science decidedly is not is consensus. But that's what it's become. It's become like, let's take a vote among scientists as to what is true and what is conspiracy. And whatever that vote may be, then that will therefore define science. And the vote was largely conducted through Twitter. Doctors like Jay Bhattacharya at Stanford were called conspiracy and turned down, while being correct, by the way, on masks and lockdowns and vaccine efficacy, while those that are incorrect but in the popular majority were called science because they established a consensus on Twitter. That literally affected your life, meaning your physical being. If you had a job, if you just went to your first year of college, if you played professional athletics, you had to take a shot because the consensus said that's the true and appropriate way to fight COVID. It set into motion laws, regulations. You couldn't go into restaurants in certain cities without a mask. You couldn't go without a vaccine. Based upon a false definition of science that was actually even a false creation of consensus on Twitter. And look, that's not even to say the point of our conversation today, which is the way it manipulated your mind. And God love you, those that say this to me. Not me, that's for the weak-minded. That's not, didn't manipulate my mind. I was always out there searching for the truth. You don't know what you don't know. We are all living in context. We're all fish swimming in water, not even aware that it's water. We're swimming in a sea of information, some false, some true. some allowed to question, some dictates from capital S science. I was at this holiday party this weekend back in the Upper West Side of New York. And these are my friends. I mean that. These are my friends. And I would say this to their face. I probably do. And so they may not consider me at all times their friend. But I am not in the consensus in the Upper West Side. My friends are almost invariably, not exclusively, but overwhelmingly liberal. And they don't know this, but they are far left. No one thinks they're far left, but they are. You just have to get a little context, maybe swim in some different waters, and you will see. And maybe it's very fine. Say it back to me. Well, look at the waters you swim in. You've gotten pretty far right. I'm always willing to hear a description of the water. But my friends, I want to tell you this. So, all right, this is a casual conversation, right? So this is the type of stuff you talk about with your friends, but I'm going to bring it to you here, and I'm not reporting. I'm just telling you how a conversation went down. Did you guys hear about this it's ridiculously sad story out of the World Cup? Grant Wall, a soccer writer, one time with Fox Sports, and Grant was with Sports Illustrated for, I think, at least 2 decades. Grant Wall was at the World Cup, and I'd say a week or two ago, he wore a rainbow flag T-shirt. Of course, homosexuality doesn't exist in Arab nations, Muslim nations, but it certainly isn't looked kindly upon. So Qatar had been, I think, regulating messages, even down to the teams, right? I think the German team, for example, several teams tried to say something in support of LGBTQ community, and Qatar said, no, not here, not in Qatar. And Grant decided to wear that T-shirt. He filmed himself trying to go in the stadium. He was pushed back. He got into a back and forth with the stadium security. They detained him, took him into a room, and I think they sort of had it out. I don't know how it went down, but I think in the end, Grant got to go into the stadium and wore his T-shirt. So a week or two pass. And then shockingly, on Friday, we get the news the Grant Wall has died. Grant Wall's died suddenly in the stands at the World Cup. Really, honestly, dropped dead. You learned from Grant's podcast that he hadn't been feeling well for a week or two. He had what we now think was bronchitis. But everyone is sitting there going, this is weird. Okay, now let's set aside reporting. And I'm just telling you how casual conversations go because we are having a conversation here together. You know how it is. Everybody's going, that's weird. Everybody's going, this doesn't add up. Nobody's reporting. Everybody's being speculative. And here are the kind of things my friends are saying, right? We're throwing everything against the wall. Well, could they have stuff? Does our CIA have stuff that you could rub a lotion on somebody's bare skin and within a matter of time it causes a heart attack? And look, nobody's casting aspersions or accusing the Qataris. I'm just saying what exists, right? We were all throwing stuff against the wall. Does that exist? The high-level intelligence agencies have the ability to do that. Could he have been healthy and just died? Could he have been using illicit drugs? Hey, you know what you have to consider these days? What about fentanyl? Did he take something for bronchitis and it was poisoned with fentanyl? I'm just telling you right now, that is happening way more than we all realize. Just a little bit of personal insight that recently that I'm not going to share right now. But I'll bet you anything, people in the past, in the last couple of years that we thought, he had a heart attack. We didn't even know to run toxicology on fentanyl. Because it's in everything. But you're throwing everything against it. And we know we're being irresponsible. Hell, we're being conspiratorial. But then I go, well, I wonder how many times, he's had the mRNA vaccine. And look, the interesting thing is now, and by the way, the minute I said it, it was like I farted in church. I mean, everybody's eyes go, well, here we go. Look, I said, it's scientifically, data-drivenly true that there is vaccine injury, right? And it is tied to the heart. There are, increased incidences of myocarditis. There are people that are injured, and some fatally, from the vaccine. The great question isn't whether or not it exists, but really in what percentage and how prevalent. But none of that broke through. I can see none of it. And here's what I'm getting at. And I'm not saying that's what happened with Grant Wall, but we're all saying we're just sort of like in that stage of brainstorm, right? No idea is a bad idea. In 1 minute, my friends are willing to consider the proposition that a high-level intelligence agency rubbed an unknown substance on someone's bare skin that could cause a heart attack within 30 minutes. They're willing to consider the plausibility of that, but they're totally unwilling to consider that there's any potential downside to the vaccine. No, now that's a bridge too far. That's conspiratorial. My friends didn't even, hey, how's the water? Can you tell the water you're swimming in? Here's another one. I'm telling you, this is in the same time frame of the same party. They were reminiscing on COVID. It's so crazy. Can you believe, we live like that and everything? And somebody goes, wow, China's just now lifting the restrictions. Dude goes, oh, well, China's vaccines, aren't so good. One of my friends goes, well, neither are ours. And he goes, blah, blah, ours are way better. There's no ability to step back and accept anything outside of the consensus unquestioningly created through mechanisms that start with Twitter. I'm not saying just Twitter. Look, the CDC, the NIH, Fauci, who we're going to talk about here as we continue this conversation, what kind of influence they had on Twitter. But the total unwillingness, while at the same time, again, another friend said, hey, what do you think Elon Musk is up to? Wait, what do you mean what he's up to? Like, I don't know, you mean like free speech? No. Squint eyes, glare. What's he up to? Like world domination we talking about? Oh, we're back. We're back where this is cool. But talking about the vaccine in any type of way that ends in a question mark, way beyond the pale and conspiratorial. I mean, we're seesawing back here. I'm sorry, bud. I can't keep up. Like, when is this irresponsible and when is this responsible? I got a little science and data over here that shows, we might need to take a look and run some studies and run some risk rewards based upon where you are on the actuarial tables when it comes to endless boosters of this vaccine. But this, data is conspiratorial. Meanwhile, shoot from the hip on, like lotion heart attacks and world domination plans by Elon Musk. That's cool. That's the power. And here's the thing, though. I want to say this. I don't blame my friends at all. Do you know how hard it is to actually understand you're swimming in water? That's why I always try to reemphasize to myself and ask you to hold me accountable. Hey, describe the water to me. You think I've swum to the deep ends of the right side of the ocean? Describe the water. I'll have the conversation with you because it's really hard to be self-aware. It's really hard. Where would you even start? Like, my friends, they're not, even though they're far left, what are they? I don't think they're like on, thenation.com, avowed communist publication from its past. No, they're consuming CNN, NBC. They're consuming mainstream stuff. They're consuming word of mouth from friends. They're consuming Dr. Anthony Fauci. They're having water, meaning what is consensus, what is acceptable, what is newsworthy, and they're having conspiracy defined by an overwhelming force of power that is reflected in the conversation we're having about Twitter. What would I even tell them? I mean, they're not going to listen to me on Fox. The brand Fox itself has defined me. Another one of my friends, I love him. I sent my schools, he made a joke about racism, right? Fox, right? Well, he sends his kids to private school. I sent my kids to school in Harlem. It doesn't matter. Fox. Everything is shallow and everything is simple because we let it wash over us. We float on an ocean. Where our rudder only sinks so deep into the ocean, shallow. But that ocean of information, how do you ask somebody to actually sail their way through to truth? Not only do I not judge my friends, I feel for them. It's hard, man. And I'm not saying I get it right. I don't. I mean, I read a lot, so much so I'm having some eye issues. I'm telling you something. I got to get to the doctor. I'm telling you, I've been reading way too much on my digital devices too. But I read a lot. And I still have trouble going, is that reputable? Is that true? Dig deeper. And that's what news is today. It truly is. You got to dig dig, and find yourself a voice that you hope you can trust to do the same. That's it, man. It's crazy how, I said to you last week, it's crazy how the more civilized or progressed we become, the more we become like tribes fighting for power. The more we're inundated with information, the more we are reverting to, well, I heard. Including me. Well, I don't know. I just know that I heard. It's almost like progress, not unlike a political circle, right? Politics isn't a spectrum, it's a circle. At some point, the fascists and the communists are indistinguishable. It's just whether or not you're a member of 4 or 5 or you're by yourself. At some point, I think even progress and evolution meet back around with base instinct. Anyway, all of what we accept as acceptable really has its germination in a place like Twitter. They told us they weren't doing this. Twitter told us looked into our eyes, lied into our face, and said, as we now know from Twitter Files 2, they were not shadow banning. No, we wouldn't silence Dan Bongino. We wouldn't do that with Charlie Kirk. We wouldn't do that with Jay Bhattacharya. No. Jack Dorsey told Matt Lauer on the Today Show, we do not politically or ideologically shadow ban. Jack Dorsey went before Congress, said we do not shadow ban. Now, he's probably playing some type of semantic game with himself. What's the definition of shadow ban? What's the definition of conservative? What's the definition of political ideology? He's probably finding a way so that he can lie to himself that he's not lying to you. But they lied that they weren't shadow banning. What can be done? Well, first of all, I had a conversation with an attorney, Ilya Shapiro, this weekend. Fascinating. Let's say one of these individuals who had their voices taken away. Do they have an action against Twitter, a civil suit? And his suggestion was possibly. You see, Twitter not only lied, they had a terms of service when you signed up. And that term of service expected some type of policy. And if they weren't following a policy, if they weren't living up to their word, if they were making things up ad hoc, if they were turning down people based upon their ideology, could you sue? You got to prove damages. But could you sue civilly Twitter? What about if you had your voice taken away by the government of the United States of America? Wouldn't that, in fact, be a violation of the First Amendment? Well, you would have to prove that the government was colluding with Twitter in a way that either was a partnership or was forced upon this private business in a way that harmed your voice and was a violation of the First Amendment. So did that happen? Let's turn now to Twitter Files 3. Matt Taibbi on Friday night began to unveil the coordination, the quote-unquote partnership between the FBI, the DHS, and the Director of National Intelligence and Twitter. The guy behind the curtain, it appears, at Twitter was a man named Yoel Roth. He was Caesar. He gave thumbs up, he gave thumbs down on who survived and who died, on who spoke and who was silenced. Yoel Roth, through the internal Slack channels at Twitter, reveals that he was meeting with these law enforcement agencies on almost a weekly basis. He made jokes about, how do I make my calendar generic enough that it doesn't reveal what I'm talking about and who I'm talking about it with? Another Twitter employee joked back to him, you mean talking about Donald Trump with the FBI? And he replied, pretty much. He was meeting with those law enforcement agencies, talking about what is and what is not disinformation. Now, it is possible for the United States government to make a recommendation to a private company on what is and what is not disinformation and not have that be a violation of the First Amendment. The fact that we have Twitter meeting with government agents on a weekly basis is not a nail in any particular coffin. Last week, I made you the circumstantial evidence case, as you would have not direct evidence, but circumstantial evidence of a murder. The circumstantial evidence case that there was collusion between the government and Twitter. That case continues to be strengthened by Twitter Files 3. But the way it would work is you would almost have to have an email or very strong circumstantial evidence that one of two things took place, that these two were together or Twitter was forced by the FBI to abridge the First Amendment. Now, were they together? Well, Twitter employees were talking amongst themselves about how to characterize their relationship. One Twitter employee said to another, should we call our friends at the FBI experts? Doesn't seem right to call them experts on COVID or what is not misinformation, on even elections. They were telling Twitter, mail-in balloting. Don't let Trump or a Republican call into question mail-in balloting. But meanwhile, Eric Holder, the former Attorney General for Barack Obama, would tweet questioning mail-in balloting, and Twitter would do nothing. They settled on the term partnership. They called their relationship with law enforcement a partnership. That's pretty concerning. Well, what about inducement? What if Twitter felt like it didn't have a choice but to follow the recommendations of the FBI? At the same time all this was going on, Democratic politicians in Congress were banging the drum about regulating big tech and regulating it because they hadn't censored enough. Name your Democratic politician. They had been before Congress talking about, we're going to have to do something about Facebook, about Twitter. We're going to have to do something about these social media companies and Russian collusion and Russian hacking and misinformation. It's like the mobster that walks in your store. Nice shop you got here. Be ashamed if something happened to it. You buy an insurance policy from the mobster so that he himself doesn't break your windows. The government's threatening to break the windows of big tech while telling them what they need to do to avoid any such type of regulation. I recommend this type of censorship. The circumstantial case gets stronger for the partnership between big tech and the government. Now, in Twitter Files 4, Michael Schellenberger takes us towards January 6th. You'll remember I asked Elon Musk what other things besides the Hunter Biden laptop had Twitter censored. He said, well, we'll see. There's questions about January 6th and COVID. In Twitter Files 4, they're taking us towards January 6th and the censorship of the leader of the free world, the silencing of President Donald Trump. What Schellenberger reveals in Twitter Files 4 is that Twitter had the semblance of a policy that they followed in the beginning, the pretense, the costume of a policy. If you say X, it can lead to Y. What we saw happen over time, over a matter of approximately 3 months, is that policy, which was weak, fall apart. Every word has a different definition. Every instance has a different circumstance until it devolved into a literal Politburo, Yoel Roth, Vijaya Gad, to some extent, Jack Dorsey, who were the secret door to my friend Sharky's question. Tell me what really happened. I can take it. What's behind the door? Well, behind the door at Twitter was a handful of executives who took every single one of these cases on a case-by-case, ad hoc, arbitrary, and Caesarean, thumbs-up, thumbs-down basis. And by the time they got to the President of the United States and Donald Trump, they had no real policy violation. Oh, they didn't. No, that not questioning the integrity of elections wasn't enough. Then they adopted some weird 5-strike rule out of the blue. They celebrated because they knew it would lead them down. It's crazy how similar this is to sort of the laws of communism. I've said this to you before, but Joseph Stalin's head of the secret police said, show me the man, I'll show you the crime. You decide what you want to do. You decide who you want to punish. You figure out afterwards your justification. And that's what they did with Donald Trump. They set aside the policy, set aside even the 5-strike rule. Eventually, they just arbitrarily decided, hey, we should kick off the leader of the free world. Schellenberger had 2 tweets I thought really summed this up well in Twitter Files 4. He says the underlying problem is that the dominant platforms have always been loath to own up to their own subjectivity, because it highlights the extraordinary unfettered power they wield over the global public square and places the responsibility for that power on their own shoulders. So they hide behind an ever-changing rule book, alternately pointing to it when it's convenient and shoving under the nearest rug when it isn't. Perfect. They wouldn't own up to their own subjectivity, which is exactly how they conducted business. Why? Because it revealed exactly how much power they wielded. And if they had that power, they knew it would come with scrutiny and responsibility. So they wore the costume of a policy, of a rule book. They pretended to follow the law, when in the end, they were nothing but little kings of censorship. Scott Adams, who is a cartoonist, is behind Dilbert. He's been controversial. He's probably been somebody who's been censored. He doesn't know it yet because we haven't seen all the names by Twitter. He's a little bit unpredictable. Not always on the right, definitely not always on the left. He tweeted this weekend. He said, "Have the Twitter files revealed any bad intentions within Twitter? To me, it looks like the employees suffered from a narrative poisoning and believed they were making the country a better place. And I don't think they broke any laws." As to whether or not they broke any laws, we've talked about the case that needs to be made as to whether or not they restrained speech in violation of the First Amendment. But I was more interested in what he had to say about how the kings of censorship became the emperors with no clothes. So I responded to Scott. Yes, I think what we're looking at are personalities driven by a moral superiority and elitism and a lack of self-awareness. Not unlike what we were talking about a moment ago. How's the water? And things like your own hypocrisy are small from that perspective. If you believe in your own righteousness, then your own hypocrisy really is of no consequence. We've seen that from televangelists. We've seen that throughout. We see that here with these Twitter lords. I went on to tell Adams the following as well. As to the blatant lying, for example, that we saw from Jack Dorsey, all liars start with lying to themselves. I think Dorsey is parsing words. What is shadow banning? What is conservative? But it doesn't matter in the end. A lie is a lie. An old colleague of mine at the Blaze, Scott Baker, said in response to me, I just happened to read this quote from George MacDonald just a few moments ago. A beast does not know that he is a beast. And the nearer a man gets to being a beast, the least he knows it. Probably true of all of us in some regards. I think Scott is exactly right. And that's what I'm talking about. The more we progress, it's as though the more we go back to our base instincts. Listen, this was always bigger than Twitter. What we now know, thanks to Elon Musk, is going down at Twitter. And by the way, a note on Elon Musk. Elon Musk has said you have access, but you do not have the right to reach. That hate speech is free speech, but you don't have the freedom of reach. What's he talking about? But shadow banning. There's no sacred cows here. So I'm going to say the same thing to Elon Musk. How do you define hate speech? And what do you mean? You're going to turn down those who defines what they have to say as hate speech? I'd like to know, Elon. I would really like to know. How is your policy different than what Bari Weiss is revealing about Twitter Files 2 and shadow banning? But thanks to Elon Musk, we now know what was going on inside Twitter. But I'll promise you this, it is going on right now on YouTube. No doubt. It is going on Facebook. I know. Turn up, turn down, strike, censor. Conspiracy and consensus defined by some small minority. And it is taking place on Google. What's more powerful than search results? Seriously, Will Cain says something, back to my friends in New York, standing in an apartment talking about mRNA vaccines. You think I could Google that real quick and have some truth to show up? No, I couldn't. I mean, the studies which exist, would they even show up by page 10 of Google? Oh, it's happening in all of big tech. And it is the story that we've talked about for so long. It is the story of mind control. Listen, freedom of speech is only in part about the speaker. Look, Dan Bongino and Charlie Kirk, hell, maybe me. I don't know. Yeah, okay, we're victims to some extent. We had our voices silenced. You know the real victim, though? You. I'm serious. That's not a populist, no. You know why? Because freedom of speech is also about the freedom of the listener. You have to be able to hear all points of view to form an informed opinion so that you can describe the water. Seriously, you can't have a highly curated, manicured information stream and expect to have an accurate worldview. You can't. So if you have some viewpoints, some voices silenced, you've been deprived of your ability to form a free thought. Look, that would be the case if the censorship was working in my favor, and it wasn't. It was one-sided. It was partisan, and it's very concerning, at the very least, whether or not it's a First Amendment violation, that the government colluded in their recommendations and all of it flowed in one direction, towards one point of view, one ideology, even one party, Republicans and conservatives. And at the very least, we walk away from this, you say it's bigger than Twitter because our deep state, I know that's going to set off buzzes in some people's heads, but no, the deep state, the permanent Washington, the intelligence apparatus is so partisan, is so rigged against one ideology, one system, one viewpoint. That doesn't make any sense. Even if they're just constitutionally correct recommendations, all in support of the ideology that does support the deep state, grow the government, grow permanent Washington. But the point is, it's if you do not have access to information, if you cannot hear whatever voice you choose, you do not have a fully formed thought. You do not have free thought. You are subject to manipulation. Your worldview has been altered by design by someone. Edward Bernays in the 1930s, 40s, 50s. Jack Dorsey, the FBI. Yoel Roth. What a little boy king. In 2020. That is mind control. And that means this story is bigger than the Twitter files. Hey, sometimes you got to win those that you don't deserve to win. The Dallas Cowboys did not deserve to beat the Houston Texans, and Dak Prescott was bad. Fine. Want me to say it? I said it. Okay? Like every Cowboy game, and they're not many, seeing how they've won 10 games and only lost 3. But every down game, I hear you, I see you on Twitter. He's so bad, Will. He's so average. This is your biggest failing. This is where you can't describe the water. Let me just tell you, a win's a win, and sometimes you got to win those that you don't deserve. Game-winning drive at the end. Awesome goal line stand. Dak throws a horrible pick while on his own 1-yard line. Houston gets the ball, has a goal line to go, basically to win the game. The Cowboys stop them all the way through 4th and goal. Just man football. And then Dak engineers a game-winning drive, baby. That is not the way you want it to look. That's the winning that you want to show. I didn't feel great watching the game. I didn't feel great on Sunday after that party. And it wasn't just because, viewpoint discrimination with my buddies, my friends, whom I love. I made a lot of juvenile decisions. It was a daytime party, so plenty of time to be ready for work. Baileys and sangria and mimosas and mixing it all up and finish it off with tequila. Just juvenile stuff. Just freshman college level stuff from me here. Just grade A, is this your first beer stuff from Will this weekend. Got to get healthy. Got to grow up. Got to see you again on Wednesday, right here on the Will Cain Podcast. Hey, it's Will Cain. Click here to subscribe to the Fox News channel on YouTube. It's the best way to get our latest interviews and highlights. And click to subscribe to the Will Cain Podcast for full episodes right now.